Good afternoon, everyone. It's an absolute honor to be here, to spend some time at the Dublin Web Summit, a beautiful city, and it's great to be able to share some of my thoughts with you. So, what I'm here to talk to you about today is how some brands are using context to get closer to their consumers in something that we're calling Channel U. Now, I think celebrating change is something that we do a lot at Telefonica, and I think it's quite apt here for the Dublin Web Summit, where there's so many brilliant startups and such a fantastic community embracing digital and understanding how that's really disrupting every industry. And it's something that we know a lot about at Telefonica. 30 years ago, we experienced a revolution in our business where we had to transform ourselves into what we are today, which is one of the world's largest mobile network operators. And then, a few years ago, we had another revolution, which was the digital revolution. And we needed to become a digital telco. And so, the kind of things which you might be familiar with that we're doing in the digital world that you might not be aware of, we are using our machine-to-machine technologies to be able to power some of the world's most connected vehicles, like Tesla. In places like Peru, we're using remote monitoring technologies in hospitals to be able to bring down readmittance rates by up to 43% using some e-health solutions. Using our company like Smart Steps, which is a part of our business where we use anonymized insights on how human traffic moves in urban environments. And we use that data to help brands and local government to help make smarter business decisions. And one side of our business that you will probably be aware of in the startup world is Wira, which is our world-famous startup accelerator, where we have 12 academies in 10 different markets, which we're very proud of. So, I guess disruption is everywhere, but clearly it's not just the telecoms market that's being disrupted, right? So, I think that massive disruption is going on in the world of advertising, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. And I believe that we're entering a new era in advertising that's related to the age of context. And in this new age, I believe that it's having a profound effect, not just on the way that brands are buying media, but also the way that brands are telling their stories in those media. Now, I think, with regards to context, the context has always had an effect on the way that brands tell stories. If you go back in time, many, the first media, like radio, when you created radio content or even radio ads, you knew where people were. They were going to be sat in their front room, they're going to be with their family, they're going to be gathered around the radio listening to it. Then radio was put in cars. So suddenly you needed to create new forms of content and advertising based on drive time. So I guess context has always had an impact on the way that brands tell stories. Now, if you take that further, is there anyone a fan of 24 in the audience? There are only 24. It's a little bit old now, but I think we like a bit of Jack Bauer. I think that 24 is a great example of commercial TV, right? The way that story was told is that you have a mini cliffhanger before each ad break. You have an oh my god moment just before the end of the show to bring you back to the following week's episode, right? Meaning more eyeballs, meaning higher prices for TV spots, meaning more money for the media companies and ultimately driving shareholder value. This is a business model that works. And continues to work very well today. But obviously, that changed, and the context has changed when you look at other TV shows. Are there any House of Cards fans in the house today? Are there? Yes, I thought there'd be a lot more of you. I'm a big fan as well. But that's a great example, House of Cards, of where it's the antithesis of commercial TV, obviously, where there's no need for a cliffhanger. You don't need to bring people back the following week, because obviously it's Netflix original content. And the habits of the consumers are actually changing, so the way that the story is told is actually slightly different. It's doesn't need to be as fast-paced, even though it is at times. It's completely up to the storyteller how they want to do it, unaffected by advertising. And in terms of the way that the habits that it's changing, binge watching as a result of this is now huge. I don't know if you know, but on day one that Series 3 was launched on Netflix, it occupied 45% of total US internet bandwidth. 45%. Extraordinary. And the consumptions around mobile video are only growing, as I know people on the previous panels and the presentations today have been talking about. So the context has always had a great effect on the story. But I think that the thing is, here in 2015, mobile is now. Mobile is taking your attention. Does anybody know what this is? Has anyone seen this before? Anyone in the audience? This is a mobile lane in Chongqing in China. So if you walk on to us, the left-hand side, that is where if you're using your mobile to stop you injuring yourself or others, you will need to walk in this lane. If you're not, then you can go in effectively the fast lane. And I think this is relevant, and the story it's telling is that mobile is grabbing increasing amounts of your attention, and that's only going one way. And if you look in the audience today, I think if I do a reasonable job over the next 20 minutes, you'll probably only check your mobile 4 or 5 times, right? So I think that's the way things are going, and it's probably a microcosm of life. I'm not going to get all philosophical about the impact of people using their mobile phones with your family, at work. You're fighting for attention when you're with colleagues in a meeting from their mobile. You're fighting for attention everywhere. This is what is happening, and this is the way things are. Now, in 2013. Shel Israel and Robert Scoble wrote a book that had a big impact on me, and my colleagues at Telefonica are also very inspired by this book. I recommend anyone to read it if they haven't. They predict a world they predict that we're moving into an era where the next generation of predictive technology will know us better than some of our closest friends. And the mobile will unlock social media, data, the sensors on our devices, and it will unlock location. And this will create a revolutionary way for people to interact with other people, objects, and the world around us. It's going to have a big object. In short, mobile unlocks the age of context. Even though mobile is now, I don't think of it as a channel. We don't think of it as a channel. I think through the digital era, it gave us the ability to buy programmatically in that move from buying channels to buying audiences. But now, in the age of context, with mobile, you can have so much contextual information about a person that you know what it's like to be that person at that moment. So you're not so much targeting them as communicating with them. And I think that the next generation of advertising superstars, of advertising creatives, is not going to be like Don Draper that we can see here. I think the next generation of advertising talent is going to be around creatives and technologists, madmen and mathmen, people who can combine the two. And I think that's super important to recognize. It's the ability to take that data, understand insight, understand the contextual feeds that we're getting to be able to create the most relevant messages. So mobile is now, but at Telefonica, we know a lot about developing markets as well, not just in developed markets. We have over 200 million customers across Latin America, And it's quite interesting what's going on, the dynamic between developed markets and developing markets. So, they are still feature phone first, but changing very rapidly. And we know that in 2017, there will be the inflection point where there will be more smartphones than feature phones. And it's often quite counterintuitive. You'd naturally think that people in developed markets, like in Europe, for example, or the US, would be bigger smartphone users. But when you look at the stats, you can see that the usage, for example, who do you think it would be, Mexicans or Americans? Would you think it would be Brazilians, or would you think it would be the Spanish? Would you think it would be Argentinians or the Germans? So there really are, we're seeing a lot of counterintuitive information coming back from developing markets about how people are using their mobiles. And there's also been this revolution going on in shopping behavior as well. How people compare prices when they're in store, for example. As we can see here in some of the developed markets in Europe, it's up to 37%, but when you start blowing that out to Latin America, that behavior is even more profound and accelerated. And similarly, when you take that beyond pure price comparison and how people actually use it to find out other information, you'll be contacting a family friend or someone else about what you should buy in the store, you can see that actually it's even higher in some of the developing markets in Latin America. So again, quite counterintuitive stats that are coming back. Now, I think a lot of you will have heard of, or hopefully you would have heard, a brilliant lady called Mary Meeker from KPCB on the West Coast. She's like the poster child of, certainly in our industry and mobile advertising, when she comes up with stats every year for not just how the mobile world, but how the digital world is tracking and how we can reimagine new industries. Now, Mary Meeker, when she looks at the US, she talks about a 3x opportunity between eyeballs and between mobile advertising spend, between 8% and 24%. It has 24% of your attention, but still brands are only spending 8% of their budgets reaching you. And when you compare this with other channels, there's a big gap to fill. And it will. I think the difference will definitely be bigger. But you can see that when you expand this out to places like Latin America and developing markets, there's an even bigger opportunity, where it's almost like an 8x opportunity. So, I think that it's also important to recognize that these developing markets are sometimes skipping desktop altogether and just going straight to mobile. And we can also see with the growth, we need to understand that 80% of all smartphones will be in emerging markets within the next 5 years. So that's a really important thing to remember when we're looking at planning if you're developing your business in other parts of the world. And also to understand that in some of these developing markets, the infrastructure is already changing more considerably in some of the countries that you wouldn't naturally associate with this, like M-Pesa in Kenya, for example, where they already have a mobile payment infrastructure. Now, in terms of how brands can win in this age of context, what is it they can do to make a difference? I've identified 3 rules of how brands can get ahead in this new era. The first is related to connectivity. I think we've all seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I think some of you may have seen that as well as needing food and water, now we know that Wi-Fi and battery life are actually up there and nearly just as important. And smart brands have always been able to respond to these changing needs, and you can see that some of them are already starting to sponsor connectivity in airports. They're starting to be able to provide charging ability in airports. So this has always been happening. Now, because we're a carrier, we can also see that the hunger for mobile data is accelerating at an extraordinary pace. And I think, and we've heard this on a number of different panels, the consumer appetite for video and rich experiences is just going one way, and it's soaring northwards. But we can see that people are hitting their data wall on their data plan. So there is an unanswered need for removing some of the blockers to people consuming that rich content, that video. And we think that's around connectivity. It's a great opportunity for brands to be able to connect with their consumers in a very relevant and engaging way. For example, this is one of our hottest products at the moment, and we've just launched it in Brazil here with Bradesco Bank. Bradesco Bank is one of the largest national banks in Brazil. What they have done is they buy the data for their banking app from us so that their consumers don't have to pay. That's quite game-changing in Brazil, where up to 40% of people are hitting their data wall every month. Now, we think that this could be as significant as the introduction of 0800 numbers 25 years ago, when brands gave consumers the ability to call them for free. We think the ability to do that with data could really change things. And it's been so successful so far that they've now been running TV ads to tell people that they don't have to pay for their data. It won't come out of their data tariff when they use the Bradesco banking app. So that's rule number one. Connectivity is the new need. We think it can be the next universal utility brand experience. The next rule is related to data. I think when you would talk about running a contextual ad a few years ago, many years ago, it would have been taking out a press ad next to a piece of relevant editorial. But today, in the digital age, as we move from buying channels to buying audiences, the quality of the data is what you rely on to run the best advertising. Now, if people don't have the right kind of data, then ultimately it can mean that people are getting a substandard piece of experience because they're not necessarily being exposed to the right kind of content. And people can get data from all over the place. And a lot of this comes down to the way some data is collected. So if ultimately the best kind of data that you can have is authenticated data, which is sort of validated or authenticated by a billing relationship. Without that, you run the risk of people having a substandard experience. As a telco, we have that kind of relationship with our consumers, and we're able to use that data to help brands understand who customers are, some of their behaviors, and we have some interesting segmentation around their online and offline behavior, and can unlock some of the contextual triggers that we were talking about earlier when you look at Shell Israel and Robert Scoble's book. And we use Axonics. That's where we have our data, and that's our touch point with the marketplace. That's the place to use our data to power advertising. So that's the rule number 2, get closer using high-quality data. Finally, rule number 3 is around creativity. And a few years ago, I think it was 3 years ago, I spoke at Cannes Lions about the way people use mobile. And I spoke about that the key way that they use it is to kill time, save time, or it was prime time on the way that they use it for entertainment and to consume entertainment content. Now, that largely remains the same, but I think that often the way that some brands, when they run mobile advertising today, they're almost taking desktop creative thinking over to the mobile world in exactly the same way as a lot of the early digital advertisings did when they came from the analog world. So I think there has never been a better time to really up the game on the quality of mobile creative. I think there are some really strong campaigns out there, but I think overall, I'm sure that most would agree that the quality of the mobile creative out there could be higher. There's never been a better canvas for people for a new generation of creatives to be able to take this sensor information, understand what it's like to be that person at that time, and serve the relevant content at the right time. I think that there are so many things that are available to us. When you look at this example behind me, this is actually, I think it's a startup in Spain, and what they've done is they've created a delivery service where they're able to deliver a product to you anywhere, actually where you are, not necessarily tethered to your home address or your office address. So here's an example of someone being delivered a package on the beach. I'm not saying this is right. I'm just saying this is the kind of thinking that creatives use to free themselves from existing desktop thinking. And I think with a lot of the people, there's a lot of people at the conference today, some of the best media minds, some of the best creative minds, some of the best data and tech minds. I think the way to unlock that is for everybody to not work in silos, but to work together to make sure that we're linking the creative thinkers with the technology thinkers with the data engineers to make sure that we can really unlock that. Let's lose that siloed thinking. So, I'll share an example now of a piece of, after all that, what does a decent piece of contextual mobile creative look like? And this is an example which actually comes from Latin America, was run from Guatemala a couple of years back, and I'll share that with you now. Do we have some sound?
Meatpack is the trendiest shoe store in Guatemala, a brand known for its edgy, cutting style and a store known for its unique discounts in limited edition kicks including brands like Adidas, Nike and Reebok. An icon for the sneakerhead subculture with over 60,000 fans on their fan page in less than a year. They needed to launch a new promotion that lived up to their hardcore fans, an innovative way to earn your discount. We created Hijack, an enhancement for the official Meatpack app used by our customers. Using GPS tracking technology that marks every competitor's store of the brand sold at Meatpack. So every time one of our sneakerheads enters one of the stores, it triggers a special notice with a promotion. Hijack sends an alert to the person's mobile with a discount that starts at 99% and decreases by 1% every second that goes by, making the countdown stop until you reach our store. More than 600 customers were hijacked from the competitors in a week. One customer, Pedro Rodriguez, got a record-breaking 89% discount. This is the first promo campaign that started the sale in the competitors' stores.
So I think that's a really great example of contextual creative to think about using the different sensors that you have available. So that's it really, the 3 rules. Connectivity is the new need. Take the opportunity to sponsor data, to pick up the tab for your customers' data, to unlock the app world. Second, make sure that you're using high-quality data or first-party data to make sure you know absolutely sure who you're talking to. And then finally, use non-siloed thinking to creative to make sure that the technology teams, the creative teams, and the data teams are working together. Thank you very much for listening to me. We're lucky enough at Telefonica to work with a lot of the world's leading brands to help them power their advertising, and we'd be very happy to talk to anyone or startups that are here today to understand how we can help. Thank you very much for your time and for listening.